Hello and welcome back to my build series for the Walthers National Model Railroad build-off. In this update I will be covering the building of the land formations out of extruded polystyrene or pink foam. You'll have to excuse me, I've done some of the cutting already off screen just to make a long video a little bit shorter. You don't need to see me doing a dozen of the same cuts. Anyways, I begin by taking my hobby knife and cutting down the foam. One cut just to mark where I'm going, and then I will do a couple more cuts to get further through the foam, and then eventually you can just break the foam off. It takes a decent bit of force to break this stuff, but after you've done a couple of score lines through it, it snaps off pretty easily, as long as you remember to take the sticker off. Once you get the piece cut out, you can pick a template that you want to use and do a couple more score lines down the edge of it. And then you can pick up your hot wire foam tool and cut out the proper shape. This makes it much easier if you have something to follow. A pen works just as well. When you're ready to glue this stuff down, you need to score it up. You can use either a saw blade like I'm doing, sandpaper, or a wire brush. I've forgotten a couple of times and it hasn't come back to bite me yet, but I've decided that I don't want to risk it this time around. I'm kind of going overkill, but do what feels good to you. So the product I'm using here is Liquid Nails Projects adhesive. Another thing you can use is PL300 foam board adhesive from Loctite. The reason I like these over something like Gorilla Glue is they don't expand, and they're also not water soluble like wood glue or white glue. Since these glues don't expand, you don't really need to weigh them down very much as long as you're working on two level surfaces. A little bit of extra weight doesn't hurt anything, however, I've found that it doesn't really make too much of a difference. So once you put it on, I suggest spreading it out a little bit like I'm doing here, slightly off camera. Sorry about that, I'm still getting a hang of this camera thing. I'm probably going a little bit overboard on the amount of glue that I use, but this stuff's pretty cheap at like $4 a tube, so you're not really wasting too much money. So if you've cut the rock face similar to the way that I have, where they're roughly all the same size, you don't really have to decide which one you want on top. I'm just kind of throwing them up there and what looks good, kind of haphazardly. Then you take it and you can spin it up so that the next time you pick up a board, that will be the next one that goes down. Then on to gluing things down again. So again, this might be a little bit of overkill, but I'm putting a little bit of extra glue on here. I've noticed that sometimes if you don't put glue across the cracks, your scenery will kind of start to sink into it a little bit, or something can flex along that line. I don't end up doing it across the horizontal lines. I've noticed that it doesn't really cause a problem there. It's just the vertical lines that go through the foam that I've seen problems in the past. And now to a bit of an overhead shot. As you can see, I'm also playing some YouTube in the background, listening to a review about the recently released Triclops from Athearn. So at this stage, pretty much all that is left is to glue the whole mountainside down. I mark them really quickly with a series of dots so I can know at a quick glance where they go in the stack without having to piece them all back together. Now I just have the top piece to fit. I'm using some scraps here. The reason I can't do it while it's in the back is because of the piece of conduit. It's a little bit too low to fit this extra inch under there. I cut off from each other, so they fit up pretty good. And here we go again with some more marking and cutting. I really like these hot wire foam factory tools, although one thing that I've realized is I bought the wrong version. I should have bought the Pro version, which has a much stiffer wire and cuts a lot easier than this. As you can see, I'm really straining to keep the wishbone section of it apart. I haven't figured out if I can just tighten that down yet. I think I did, and it still slipped a little bit. I designed a tool that I 3D printed that could hold these apart without me having to strain so much, but I lost it sometime when we redid the basement. So now that I have that top piece cut, I'm now going to start my scoring and gluing again. This hacksaw blade really came in handy. Probably could have done a better job of cleaning away some of the chaff, and I wouldn't have had some of the issues with the pieces sticking up higher. But In the long run, it's fine. It's all going to be covered with Sculpt-A-Mold anyway. I think at this point on YouTube, I'm watching Toyman Television's newest video. So shoving the hacksaw blade into the foam is a little bit overkill, but if it deserves to be done, then it deserves to be overdone. You can probably skip this step. Let's find a good piece of scrap foam here for a trowel. And I'll go ahead and use the last bit of the tube of glue here like it's a thing of toothpaste. And I completely forget that. I can take it and roll up the ends to get everything out. Instead, I struggle with it every single time. So I know earlier that I said that this wood glue is water soluble. However, it's pretty water resistant, come to find out. So I decided that I'd use a bunch of this in the middle here. It's not going to come into contact with a lot of water or paint, so it's not really going to end up being a problem in the end. Whoa, who let those guys out of their project box? Anyways, if you'd like to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have any feedback or comments, go ahead and leave those below. It could be on the video itself, or it could be on the diorama. I'm always open to more suggestions. Clearly I've angered them. If you don't hear from me next week, send help, please.